want to welcome you all to the event this evening, Struggling to Win, part of a national tour, Struggling to Win, Anarchists Building Popular Power in Chile. And the tour's goals are, in general, to convey lessons learned in struggle and to create solidarity across hemispheres. My name is Connor. I've been a student, educator, and activist in the City University of New York since 2006. I'm also a part of Free University and a variety of other rabble-rousing initiatives. First want to introduce the speaker who will be here tonight, and then just give a really short preface for how lessons between Chile and New York City are so important to weave together tonight. Gabriel is a militant of the Libertarian Students Front, the FEL, or FEL, and veteran of recent student protests that rocked Chile, and has been active with mural brigades. And a co-speaker who wasn't able to come tonight, but who is the other main participant in this tour, is named Pablo. And Pablo, just so you know, who else is traveling around the U.S. with Gabriel, is a co-founder of Librería Proyección, which is a social center and bookstore in downtown Santiago. Pablo is also a translator and on the editorial board of libertarian communist journal Solidaridad. So just really briefly to speak about the significance of this event in CUNY and in New York City, we have an abundance of lessons to learn from Chile, which in the last several years has been at the forefront of resistance to neoliberal privatization in education and society at large. Starting, or really picking up a lot of speed in 2011, a long developing radical student unionism, community organizing tradition was able to galvanize into action massive strikes, campus occupations, community marches, and neighborhood and workplace assemblies. The education movement in particular was able to intervene and frame issues for the entire country to debate around with regard to educational access, content, and control. So the following government repression, which was very intense and still is, shows exactly how powerfully these movements were affecting Chilean society, and so we should note that and honor that, the power of these movements, in general, the struggle for transformative demands and practices in our lives. Here, just to get a sense of who's here, how many people are in some way or another related to the City University of New York or education struggles in the city? Okay, wow, much respect. And that can also relate to community radical educational organizing outside of higher education. Here at CUNY, we have a very long radical history, but we've struggled over the last several years to maintain and grow a mass movement as we've seen in Chile. Recently, the CUNY administration has taken a turn to the right, and I don't want to rattle off too much, but former CIA director, U.S. war criminal David Petraeus teaching here, the ROTC returning here, the CUNY administration shutting down an important organizing space, the Morales Shakur Center at City College of New York. In addition to that, on a much smaller scale, but no less important, there's been a lot of campus repression against students, faculty, staff, alumni who have engaged in dissent and direct action here at CUNY. We've had a lot of this repression. There's been a lot of frustration that the CUNY community of New York City has, in response, shared, but this hasn't developed into a wider political struggle. So the challenge exists for CUNY and New York City groups who identify with a variety of radical traditions, be they anarchist, be they communist, socialist, pan-Arab, pan-African, otherwise radical. The challenge is to, in many ways, figure out how to work together and to elevate struggle in critical moments. So very much we're welcoming lessons from Chile on how to break through some of these organizing impasses. And if any of you feel like there's impasses or there's a possibility for breaking through them, definitely holler up. Also, just really briefly, New York City, as a lot of us are seeing, is experiencing a slow but steady resurgence in radical community education, organizing, mutual support, anti-police brutality work, as a result of a variety of things. The revolutions in North Africa, Occupy Wall Street, working groups, reclaim the streets, anti or counter-globalization movement, so it's a very long history. And I think importantly, we're taking political education a lot more seriously. Things like Free University, to toot our own horn, but also Brooklyn Base, 16 Beaver, a lot of different radical education initiatives are also, I think, have a lot to learn from Chile about regularly integrating study and action in our work. And taking seriously the pace of our organizing, the sustainability of our organizing, using social reproduction work like community childcare, community co-nourishment with food, sharing resources and alike. I think that that's something that Chile offers a lot of really powerful models about how we can try and embed some of that in New York for our own long haul of radical and revolutionary organizing. With that, I don't want to preface too much, but just to show a little bit about how these struggles are connected, and to encourage everyone who's here to definitely contribute this discussion to your own work in whatever school, city, or country you come from. So without further ado, please help me out in welcoming Gabriel to CUNY in New York City and this leg of the tour.
There's some parts I am not quite sloppy or something like that. Sorry. Well, to understand what's happening in Chile, it's very important to acknowledge all the legacies and all the implications that brought the dictatorship that we had in 1973 until 1990. This neoliberal and this repressive legacy of a civic and military dictatorship finally is what helped basically define the current situation of the labor and the student movement. The most basics of all the things that's happening is state terror. There was many unions, many peasant organizing, as well as student activists that were kidnapped, tortured, and assassinated by the political elites. At the same time, the dictatorship did this in a way to deactivate all the social movements that were coming together in those moments of the 60s and the 70s. Also, it's very important to take and acknowledge that the ruling class at that moment, in the context of an international crisis of the 70s and of the 80s, had a very important or a very big necessity of immobilizing all this very militant working class. So of course they did this alone, but also with the help of their friends, the United States Department, the United States Department of State. So one of the three more important transformations that occurred in those years were, for example, the privatization of public services, such as water, such as electricity, such as public-funded housing, social security, and a lot of all these things. All of this taken right now in hands of corporations that were oriented by profit and not by satisfying the necessities of the people. Other big important thing that occurred in those years is that the economy changed in the sense that we didn't, it commenced to be more extracting type of economy and not a manufacturing type of economy. This implicated that today 80% of the GDP is extraction type of exportions that are driven through ports and driven through trucks out of the country. Implicating also that the devastation of a lot of natural resources that we have within Chile, such as copper, such as other things that we also have. And the third implication that the dictatorship brought in all these reforms and all these new things that they were taking accomplished was the creation of new markets with, for example, housing, education, healthcare, and including transformation of peasants into agricultural workers and capitalist firms. This finally results in a great migration of people from the from the countryside to the cities, involving or finally extending into what be a big housing problem that occurs in the major cities of Chile. Finally, in 1990, Pinochet was voted out of office through a national referendum that was brought together with all this big coalition of parties that was called La Concertación. This transition parties included parties, for example, the Socialist Party and the Christian Democrats Party. And here, what they did was finally trying to allow a peaceful transition into democracy, but at the same time consolidating the neoliberal system that was implemented by the dictatorship. So this implicated that in those years, and with help of the repression and help also with of these parties, there was a great deactivation and dismemberment of all the social movements that were of the 60s and the 70s. Many organizations were outlawed, such as student federations, and many were persecuted. And there was a great fragmentation of all civil society at that time and a weakening of all the social movements. Another thing to understand what's happening right now in Chile is some data analysis. For example, inequality, house inequality in Chile. Chile is one of the most unequal countries of the region. If you see an example, the 1% of the richest people of Chile are actually more richer than the 1% of countries such as the US or the UK. So our rich people are more richer than your people. And some people are actually very proud about that. Well, in this context, after this transition commences, is that a new anarchism starts to develop in Chile. Basically, this was a context in where social movements needed to rebuild themselves and redefine themselves. There was a great blossom of a lot of affinity groups and small initiatives that were occurring at that moment. Street propaganda, street protest type of influence, and there was also a lot of groups, a lot of youth that was very disappointed of all the process that of this more traditional groups, more traditional parties were trying to give to the transition. So a lot of people, the youth that was rejecting electoral politics, started to assume more direct action type of tactics. And within this context is that, and within the context of counterculture and a lot of other things, is that the rebirth of anarchism in Chile begun. But not without a big tension between individualist points of view, lifestyle points of view, and more social, political, revolutionary perspectives. In 1999, after several attempts to form a national-wide organization, an anarchist group was finally consolidated in what was called the Congress of Anarcho-Communist Reunification. The main objective was to reinforce anarchism within all the popular struggles that were happening at that moment. Recognize class struggle as a central feature that we need to develop in society, and overcome all the marginal type of politics and all those more focused in propaganda and only street protests, but also being part of social movements. So the basic idea that pushed this further was the idea that people that actually wanted to participate of this Congress needed to be, and first, maybe be a little ignorant, but committed to it. Committed to be participating in it and active within it. In second terms, it was necessary to conceive anarchism only within this context of class struggle. And also, it was also that this maintained that we are organizing because we need to organize it, not because we just want to organize. organizing is a necessity, not such as a moral decision to organize. And at the same time, the idea that was that the members of this group needed to participate within social movements. And this is what we call social insurgent. It was a concept that was developed in those years, and was a concept that we bring until this year's. That's basically understanding that we, as students, for example, are part of a greater movement, a part of this social movement that's called the student movement. We're part of this sector, this subject that's called the students, and they actually have their own interests and their own problems, and we need to fight to push forward those problems, for example.